Chapter 850. Beside Bojo, the staff was still holding on to the mouse. He stretched his neck to look outside, wondering what was going on. First, the mole wanted to save energy, and now, there was this group of people. Why did it feel like they were up to something? Besides, they had to record the people who wanted to try the game. The staff was about to head to the innermost computer to take a look. A certain Supreme Alliance fan had been here for quite some time, and it was time to record him. But just as he turned around and took a few steps inside, he was shocked. He looked up and down at the battle uniform on a certain young man with a hairband. 10,000 alpacas galloped through his heart. Wasn't this too much of a liking? He worshipped him to such an extent that he even prepared a set of battle clothes for him. This wasn't the youngster's outfit just a moment ago. When did he change into it? The staff wasn't sure what to say. The youngster even turned to glance at him. What do you think of my uniform? The staff inhaled deeply. Your cosplay isn't bad. It wasn't easy to sell a computer. Why did he have to meet all sorts of strange customers? Other than this youngster, there was a little boy around 6 years old. He insisted on playing the mobile version of Hero through the big screen. His parents were rich, they were really picky. Ever since the little boy arrived, he had been sending kills to the other side. Honestly, did he think about his teammates' feelings when he was playing like this? He even wanted to buy a big screen to play online. The staff felt a headache coming on. Bojo smiled, pulling the chair closer to the little boy. Hero. The little boy was dressed fashionably, his 2 little canine teeth exposed. He was rather aloof. He was rather serious in his game. He didn't even lift his head, his brows furrowed. He would charge forward whenever he saw someone and die without hesitation. An assassin shouldn't play like this, right? Bojo supported the side of her face with one hand, looking lazy. It wasn't possible to tell that she had been attacking the internet just a minute ago. She knew that the Almighty wouldn't be suspicious if she was in such a state. Especially since the Almighty would be here soon. Bojo's gaze dimmed. The little boy didn't lift his head. You don't understand, an assassin has to charge forward. That's how my big spade plays. Otherwise, how would he be able to cut through the enemy's backline so handsomely? Bojo. For some reason, he seemed to be right. That's why you play the assassin, because Big Spade plays the assassin. Bojo pointed to his screen. The little boy was very serious. You have to learn from your idol. The shop assistant. He really couldn't understand the world of these fans. How could they still chat when there was such a huge age gap? Alright, but I think it's better if you hide and cut the back row. It's best not to kill them when there are too many of them. They have 2 tanks and you won't be able to kill them. Do you see the bushes on your left? You can hide there, and when they run over with low HP, use your second skill to slow them down and use your third skill to kill them instantly. After that, run back through the wilderness. The little boy was quite serious. Then teach me how to kill this mage. She's always wandering around me. It's making me dizzy. Mage? Both Bojo and the staff turned towards the ID the little boy had mentioned. In an instant, their lips froze. Chapter 851. The staff couldn't help facepalming. He finally understood why he would always lose on Saturdays. How could he not lose with such a troublesome teammate? Bojo felt that her little spade fan was a little troublesome, but she couldn't watch as her little spade fan died. Besides, she had to wait for the Almighty in this manner. She reached out. I'll play around, you can take a look at the controls. The little boy glanced up, sweeping a glance at Bojo's uniform. Since you're a Supreme Alliance fan like me, I'll let you play 1 round. But remember, don't rush down the tower. Bojo. It must have been tough on you to know that you can't rush down the tower. The little boy wasn't done. Where did you get your cosplay uniform? I'll get my parents to buy one for me. Is there a smaller size? The staff shrugged at Bojo. Even a child would know that she was cosplaying in that uniform. She wasn't suitable to impersonate Spade Z. Her hair wasn't even the same color. Most importantly, Spade Z's hand speed and positioning weren't something an average person could achieve. But very quickly, the staff realized that this person's maneuvering wasn't bad. For an assassin, positioning was what mattered the most. Ever since this rich second-generation young master took the phone, he took the blue beasts in passing. That wasn't all. When he swept across the middle lane, he cleared off a wave of minions. The little boy watched anxiously, reminding Bojo seriously, "Team battle, you have to pay attention to team battle." The staff wanted to facepalm again. With such a huge difference in finances and attack power, how was he going to team battle? Besides, assassins were meant to fight boss to grow. Once they reached a certain level, they would be able to capture enemies with low HP and kill them instantly. No, wait a minute. Why was he criticizing such a low-end game so seriously? Even if that person's maneuvering wasn't bad, he wouldn't be able to get up. He had already killed so many times and the difference was so huge. A long-range cannon from the opponent could take away half of his HP. How was he going to fight in such a situation? Most importantly, he had to buy his computer. However, he didn't expect that he had just turned his back. A loud game sound rang in his ears. Double kill. The staff froze, turning back abruptly. Double kill. This rich second-generation cosplay killed two people at once. How could this be? Their lethality wasn't even on the same level. The shop assistant took 2 steps forward because he wanted to know how the other party did it. When his eyes fell on the phone screen, he only saw a pair of hands, one controlling the phone while the other didn't forget to bring up the map. Even if they were fighting in the wilderness, they still had to see who had low HP. Most importantly, he was not attacking the jungle on his side, but the blue beasts in the opponent's jungle. This is too arrogant. Hiding in the bushes to hunt in the wild. Little boy couldn't understand the secret behind it. Little boy was thinking about the team battle. He stood there and gave orders in a cute manner. Don't stay at the top lane, go to the bottom lane. Why are you going to the bottom lane? While Bojo was working, she felt that something was missing. She looked up and asked, "Hey, kid, do you have candy?" The little boy glanced at Bojo. "You can go to the bottom lane first." "Why are you so fixated on the bottom lane? What exactly is there?" Bojo muttered as she glided towards the bottom lane. Little boy didn't realize that the staff beside him was already in a daze. Because, that kind of hand speed, it was simply too fast. F***ck. Besides, that little B** starred was blushing at the side. After saying "my classmate," she was extremely shy. Chapter 852. The shop assistant watched the little boy's expression, his lips twitching. He, it's fine if you're the one tricking him, but you even brought a girl along. That's not how you're going to court someone. In a 5v5 match, if 2 of the teammates were kids, F***ck, they would lose for sure. The shop assistant started to feel heartache. In the past, he couldn't win no matter how hard he fought. Bojo felt that sending the 2 of them together would affect their efficiency. But the little boy continued to guide her. "Don't be a coward, just go. Bojo, tell them that Lan Jiao is mine, whoever dares to touch her will be killed." The little boy saw his classmate was about to die, so he spat out these harsh words. He was still acting domineering. Bojo's fingers slipped, almost exposing herself. Mainly, she was laughing. This child must have watched too many idol dramas. Kill without mercy, ha ha ha, why aren't you going? The little boy was unhappy. Bojo lifted her lids lazily. I won't be motivated without candy. The little boy seemed to have made a huge decision. He walked towards his parents and pointed at Bojo. Dad, Mom, this brother wants candy. I'm not the one who wants it, he wants it. Bojo nodded. The little boy's parents, Bojo stilled. This little boy was caught off guard. The little boy was still muttering, this is the first time I'm seeing an adult asking for candy from a child. The little boy's parents were embarrassed. They wanted to say something. A graceful voice, with a hint of coldness in it, slowly rang out from behind the crowd. Your little brother has always been shameless. But it's my fault, I should have tied him up to prevent him from running around. The voice wasn't loud, but because it was so pleasant, it broke through the commotion. It was hard not to notice. When the shop assistant turned, he was already in a daze. This was Almighty Chin. He was so agitated he couldn't say a word. Was he going to defy the heavens today? Why was Almighty Chin here? The little boy was also a Supreme Alliance fan. Of course, they recognized Chin Mo. Their eyes were wide open and their cheeks were puffed up. It was clear that they were shocked. No one knew how long Almighty Chin had been standing there. He was wearing a black trench coat, and the hem of the coat was half open, revealing the pure white shirt and tie inside, which successfully made his legs look even more slender and powerful. His black hair made him look like a character from a manga, full of dazzling handsomeness. His eyes were long and narrow, slightly slanted, faintly emitting light. His gaze was fixed on them, and there was an indescribable meaning hidden within his indifference. In an instant, the surrounding crowd seemed to have become the background of the capital city. Many people who didn't know Chin Mo stared at the man in front of them in a daze. Their eyes followed his movements. He was so handsome. Just when the shop assistant and the others were at a loss for words, Chin Mo had already walked over. At that moment, the dim lights around them seemed to have all run into his eyes. They were like revolving diamonds, elegant and dazzling. However, those who were familiar with him knew that he wasn't in a good mood. Even the corners of his lips were lifted, sending a message. For example, how was he going to deal with the faintly smiling fellow in front of him? Chapter 853. Even though Bojo didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, she could sense the aura emanating from him. How should she put it? It was extremely cold. She didn't have to think to know. She wouldn't have a good ending. Even if she had thought of a follow-up, it wouldn't be useful in the Almighty's eyes. But at this moment, she had to maintain her aura. She couldn't lose in this aspect. After all, she was so handsome and aggressive. Bojo stood up, asking despite knowing the answer. There was a hint of surprise in her voice. Brother Mo, why are you here? Are you here to buy a computer as well? Chin Mo just looked at her, his gaze deep like a handsome detective interrogating a criminal in the police station. Especially with his clothes, he looked more like a famous criminal scientist from the movies. Bojo seemed to have realized something, reaching out to caress her headband. She smiled brightly. I just got a new hairstyle. Brother Mo, what do you think? Does it look good? When did you put on your uniform? Chin Mo didn't waste his breath, helping her up. He tugged on the youngster's collar, his gaze moving downwards. Those who weren't in the know would have assumed they were about to fight. But in reality, Bojo was the only one who knew the Almighty was checking if she was wearing any other uniform. Bojo definitely wouldn't leave behind such evidence. She smiled. It seems like Brother Mo picked up my jacket. I feel like I'm missing something if I'm only wearing pants. Chi Nemo arched a brow, retracting his gaze from the smooth, fair skin. The natural pressure was so piercing that it made his scalp go numb. Neither of them averted their gazes. One was elegant and handsome while the other was devilishly handsome. The crime squad watched from the side, feeling an indescribable aura. The shop assistant's mouth was wide open, so wide that half of his fist could be stuffed inside. Chi Nemo didn't reply, pressing the earpiece on his left ear. His voice was calm. Fatty. Yes, young master, I've been following your instructions. The expert hasn't left yet, he's still at the cafe on the second floor. His account is still online and he's clearing the virus quickly. Hearing this, Chi Nemo frowned. He turned to look at the guy whose smile was getting brighter. At that moment, Bojo had a thought in her mind. Almighty Fatty was like a godly assistant to her. When the team gathered for dinner, she would make him drink a few more bottles. No one dared to approach such an atmosphere. But the crime squad was anxious. The main thing was that they didn't quite understand why the expert suddenly stopped when he said he was going to arrest someone. The frozen atmosphere lasted for a few seconds. Chi Nemo said slowly to the little boy, other than shamelessly asking for candy from you, what else did this little brother do? Bojo. She had underestimated the Almighty's poisonous tongue. Little boy was quite loyal at this time. He helped me play the game, but he's too stubborn and never listens to my commands. Bojo glanced sideways at the shop assistant beside her. With that excuse, those who didn't know better would think that she was the one who was going to die. Chi Nemo followed the youngster's gaze. When he saw the uniformed staff, he lowered his voice even further. What about before the game? Chapter 854. With that, Bojo's eyes dimmed. The staff didn't seem to notice. Which one? Chi Nemo asked unhurriedly, as though he was having a casual chat. But Bojo knew it wasn't a casual chat. Every question of the Almighty was straight to the point. This way. The staff moved aside so that Almighty Chin could see the computer. Chi Nemo swept the person in front of him a glance before walking over to sit in front of the computer. His fingers glided across the light emitted by the mechanical keyboard. With a shake of the mouse, Hero's page appeared on the screen. His fingers stilled when he saw the page. With a few quick movements, he closed the page and found the computer's D drive. Even though Chi Nemo wasn't a hacker, he wasn't a computer noob either. Regardless of the type of network attack, there would be traces left on the system drive. However, what made him squint was that this computer's D drive was very clean. Bojo stood behind Chi Nemo, a hint of playfulness in her smile. Brother Emo, you think this computer is good too? The keyboard is good, should we buy one? Chi Nemo turned back to look at her and smiled. He reached out and pressed her head down. Well done. Bojo arched a brow, feigning confusion. There wasn't a hint of warmth in the Almighty's eyes. It was obvious that it wasn't a compliment. Let's go. Instead of asking for candy from a kid, why don't you think about how you're going to talk to me later, young lady? Chi Nemo lowered his voice ringing beside her ear, the coolness of his thin lips extremely close to hers. Bojo stilled, lifting her lids. *T, she had been thinking about how to escape and had forgotten about this. Their posture was already ambiguous. Now that Chi Nemo sat on the seat and asked the youngster to bend over, he turned his head and said something to her. The staff was completely dumbfounded. The crime squad didn't know where to look. Bojo maintained her gentlemanly demeanor, allowing them to size her up as she thought about how to avoid a certain conversation that night. But the Almighty's suspicions weren't over. How long has she been using this computer? Chi Nemo asked the staff again. The shop assistant was a little confused. He usually hung around the internet, so he knew that the hottest couple in esports was Almighty Chin and Spade Z. Now, it looked at how familiar Almighty Chin was with this rich young master cosplaying. Could it be that he was really from Supreme Alliance? The shop assistant didn't react in time and was shocked by Almighty Chin's sudden appearance. Now calm down. It was as if the entire computer had been struck by lightning. After all, only Spade Z could make Almighty Chin act like this. It was no wonder that the person took the little boy's phone and made a double kill. For Spade Z, in such a low-end game, if it wasn't for the huge financial disparity, he could have killed 5 times without a problem. The main thing was that he had never seen anyone praise themselves like that in front of outsiders. The staff didn't forget that the second rich kid had said something along the lines of "Spade Z is handsome" when he had first arrived. He had thought he was a fan. How could he have known that he just wanted to praise himself? Chin Mo looked into the wavering eyes of the staff and asked again, "How long has she been using this computer?" "Ah." The staff snapped back to his senses. "More than 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed as he looked at the youngster. "You like it that much?" Bojo replied, "The images are smooth." Chin Mo arched a brow. "Oh." He continued, "Bring it to the police station and study it slowly." Chapter 855. He hadn't switched off his earphones when he said the last sentence. Almost everyone on the other side could hear this conversation. Fatty finally understood what was going on. Boss had gone to catch Little Spade. But what did that have to do with him monitoring the internet? Did Boss suspect that Little Spade was that defensive expert? Fatty bolted up in agitation. Just as the others were lamenting their boss's shameless actions, Fatty was the only one scratching and scratching, feeling a little itchy. The little boy was still watching from the side. Honestly, he was shocked as well. From the looks of Almighty Chin and the little brother who had insisted on playing for him, it was highly possible that it was his idol, Big Spade. But the little brother hadn't even said the harsh words he had asked him to say and was just playing in the jungle instead of saving his beloved little girl. What should he do now to show his admiration for Big Spade and at the same time remind him not to be so willful? He was in a dilemma. The little boy frowned and exhaled solemnly. "Big Spade, I don't have any sweets. You should leave with Almighty Chin. He has already taken your computer away. He won't let you off." Bojo turned and tugged on the little boy's cap. "What are you saying?" Chin Mo had said that he would have to pay to take the computer away. He turned and watched the two of them whispering into each other's ears. He arched a brow. "Come over." She didn't need to think to know who he was talking to. Bojo adjusted her headband. Indeed, she was eye-catching. "Are we going to the police station?" "I don't think I need to go, there's a competition tomorrow afternoon. I want to clear a dungeon and practice my positioning." "Where did you get the confidence that you don't need to go?" Chin Mo's gaze swept over the youngster's hair. His voice was calm, but it gave off an invisible chill. "Give up on your shameful behavior of cheating children of candy. Until the competition, you can only be with me. It's reasonable for me to ask for sweets. I killed 2 people for him. If Brother Mo hadn't come, I could have saved his beloved little girl. It's a pity." Actually, when she said that, she knew that the Almighty's main point was the second half of his sentence. Before the competition, you can only be with me. Was the Almighty really going to lock her up for a day? The Almighty wouldn't really lock her up for a day, right? Bojo scanned the port, her left hand in her pocket tightened. When Bojo scanned the port, her left hand in her pocket tightened. But if the other computer crashed, it would disappear automatically. However, if the other computer system crashes, it should automatically disappear. Chin Mo paused and glanced at her. "Is it very honorable to ask a child for candy?" "Bojo." Shouldn't everything she said be to pave the way for the future? Come over, Chin Mo said in a low voice. Bojo knew that he was already there, but since her puppy had said so, she still inched closer. When her right hand was held, Bojo froze, her heart sinking. She glanced at his chiseled face. But it was still there. The Almighty was only holding her hand. She thought, the USB in her hand had been discovered. Chapter 856. Bojo glanced up, a mischievous expression on her face. I'm embarrassed. How was she embarrassed? Chin Mo arched a brow, tugging her away from the little boy. His stance wasn't one to be trifled with. Perhaps he was the only one who knew how important it was that the fellow in front of him was still in his hands. She hadn't expected him to be afraid. He was afraid that it would be too late, afraid that he wouldn't be able to see her face anywhere. That was crazy. Chin Mo glanced over at Bojo. Bojo sighed inwardly. He was still angry. She knew it wasn't easy to coax a puppy. It had been the same when she had been young. He had been cold and aloof. But shouldn't he like the evidence that she had sent to the crime squad? Sigh. His thoughts were hard to read. She felt that it would be a waste of her brain cells to play psychological warfare with the Almighty. Just as she was about to sigh, a lollipop was thrown over. Bojo threw a lollipop over. It was a familiar brand, her favorite flavor, mixed with the unique smell of tobacco. Bojo opened it with a smile, placing it in her mouth. Coupled with her black headband, it was a delightful sight. Chin Mo didn't say anything, tightening his grip on her left hand. After seeing this scene, the shop assistant and the little boy could still look at each other, and then turned their heads to gossip. However, the members of the Major Crimes Division following behind them could only watch with their heads lowered. No one could figure out what was going on. More importantly, the young expert didn't head straight to the parking lot. Instead, he headed to the coffee shop on the second floor. There was a brand new laptop by the window, the screen lit up and running. Fatty felt that he had to inform his boss over the phone. Young master, that expert just now shouldn't be Little Spade. Little Spade has been caught by you, but the defense system is still clearing the virus. From the time and floor, it doesn't match up. Chin Mo didn't say much, replying faintly, got it. He hung up, his long fingers caressing the edge of the laptop. It was still warm. He asked casually, what do you think of this laptop? It was obvious who he was asking. Bojo arched a brow, smiling faintly. The quality isn't bad, it's suitable for research in the police station. With the help of the lollipop, her thoughts became much clearer. Very few people knew. What was the reason she ate sweets? In fact, after the large-scale network defense, she absolutely needed to supplement these things, otherwise her thinking would become sluggish. On top of that, the battle of wits and courage with the Almighty had consumed a lot of brain power. That was why she wanted to eat something. Scientific research shows the more you work with your brain, the more sugar you need. Just like how a certain lawyer loved desserts, it was the same logic. However, because of this, that was when Bojo realized a problem. If she knew this kind of research data, it was impossible for the Almighty not to know. Why did she feel like the lollipop in her mouth was something the Almighty used to test her, young Master Chin? Looking at the computer, the crime squad members suddenly realized something. Something's up. Chin Mo lowered his eyes in the direction he was pointing at. His dark eyes swept across the screen, his emotions indifferent. Chapter 857. The crime squad couldn't understand, but that didn't mean Chin Mo couldn't either. His gaze deepened. Send a group of people to the internet cafe to understand the situation. Find out which computer is broken today and who is using it. Bring the surveillance footage from 5 to 7 to the team. The rest of you, follow me. The rest of them obviously included Bojo. Sitting in a police car in such a manner. Bojo had never thought about it in the past. Beside her was the Almighty. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed. But that was all. When the city lights hit the car window, the Almighty spoke again. The Almighty spoke again. When did you dye your hair? Bojo was watertight. I didn't dye it, it's a one-time bleaching spray. It's good, silver hair looks weird with a headband, black hair isn't bad. Is that so? Chinemo opened his eyes. Wrapped in the lights and the shadows of the car, his handsome face and beautiful smile were really dazzling. Bojo wasn't bewitched by his beauty. Usually, when the Almighty said that, it meant he didn't believe her. As expected. The Almighty's next action was to swipe open his phone and pull up a video. Do you recognize it? Bojo glanced at the ticketing staff. It was clearly her, but at this moment, she would be stupid to admit it. Brother Mo, who are you talking about? The ticketing staff that has gotten fatter. Chinemo fiddled with his lighter, a cold smile on his face. Bojo. What did he mean by fatter? I don't know him. Chinemo arched a brow. Bojo assumed that was the end of the conversation. Unexpectedly, the Almighty leaned forward, his voice calm as he glided past her ear. Are you going to tell me the truth after I strip you naked? Bojo stilled, the tips of her ears flushing. When Chinemo saw this scene, he was angry and wanted to break this guy's claws. In the end, he didn't do either. Instead, he took advantage of the hazy night sky to press his lips against her flushed ears. Since she liked to wear uniforms so much, he would let her wear them to her heart's content. Of course, Bojo could feel the kiss. Even though it was light, it sent a shiver down her spine. Then, she looked at that handsome face that could bring disaster to everything in the shadow of the car. Try kissing me again. Bojo thought to herself. If I kiss you again, I'll immediately carry you away. Unfortunately, the Almighty didn't receive her message. Furrowing his brows, he ran his fingers through her hair. Don't spray something like that in the future. It smells weird. Bojo. When the Almighty wasn't speaking, his face was rather handsome, but the moment he spoke, it was infuriating. 2 members of the Major Crimes Unit were sitting in front of the police car. He couldn't wait for these 2 lovebirds to get out of the back seat. But he could only think about it. Fortunately, it wasn't far from the police station. About 10 minutes later. Chinemo alighted first. Bojo didn't really want to go. It wouldn't be good for a hacker like her to watch the police work. Unfortunately, even if she wanted to wait outside, the Almighty wouldn't give her the chance. It was a sign that the Almighty's suspicions towards her hadn't disappeared. Brother Mo, even if I didn't accept the private interview after the competition, you don't have to cuff me, right? Bojo glanced down at the handcuffs on her wrists. What? You don't like it? Chinemo tilted his head and glanced at her. How should she put it? Bojo felt that if she said she didn't like it, the Almighty would use other methods to deal with her. It's fine after a while. Chapter 858. There weren't many who entered the crime squad in such a manner. Director Huang coughed heavily when he caught sight of the person Chinemo was handcuffed to. He thought to himself, if you want to date, then go ahead. Why do you have to come to the police station? Weren't you supposed to be the interrogator? Was this how you interrogated the case? Director Huang wanted to facepalm. She was really born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and yet, she was still so high profile. Where's Yu Hongliang? One of Chin Mo's hands was cuffed to Bojio's, the other stuffed into his pocket. It didn't affect his noble aura at all. As a bureau chief, Director Huang had to maintain his composure. Interrogation room 2. He glanced at the youngster in his hands, meaning, "You're not letting him stay." Chin Mo replied nonchalantly, "He's a suspect as well, we'll interrogate him together." Director Huang. What kind of lousy reason was that? The youngster smiled, revealing her canine teeth. Do you have a packed lunch? I heard the crime squad treats suspects well. Director Huang's chest heaved. They had a free meal the last time. Again. Fortunately, Chin Mo was still rational and didn't agree to his request. But his next sentence made Director Huang curse. After the interrogation, let's go for lobster, Director Huang will be treating. Director Huang. When did he say he would be treating? The youngster sighed. Little Huang is so generous. Chin Mo didn't even lift his head. One of the few good points. Director Huang. These two were going back and forth, making his treat a reality. How shameless. Besides, what was up with the nickname Little Huang? The crime squad's officers were perceptive, comforting their director. Calm down, calm down. Think about the time given by the higher-ups. Director Huang took a deep breath, heading towards interrogation hall 2. Yu Hongliang came from a wealthy family and was knowledgeable about the law. Even if they found out he was the culprit, he just slept with someone and wouldn't be held responsible. They could only detain him for 24 hours. After that, they would have to release him. Besides, he had connections. Ka-cha. The door to the interrogation room was pushed open. Yu Hongliang reached out instinctively, shielding his eyes. Then, he sneered and sat there as if he wasn't afraid of anything. The man had already thought of what he would say after he was caught. He was just using it in advance. Director Huang was an experienced police officer. With one look at the other party's attitude, he knew the interrogation wouldn't be simple. No wonder Chin Mo said to let him do the interrogation. Yu Hongliang casually crossed his legs. In his heart, he knew that the police would not be able to hold themselves back from asking him questions. However, the two people sitting in front of him were sitting more steadily than him. One was lying there with a lollipop in his mouth, and the other was lighting a cigarette. Their hands were handcuffed together. What the hell was going on? Ever since Yu Hongliang was diagnosed with AIDS, he had lost a lot of his patience, and his favorite thing to do was to smoke. He couldn't help but clench his fists as he stared at his opponent. What was going on with these two people? Interrogate him. About 10 minutes later. Chin Mo extinguished the cigarette, his voice calm. Mr. Yu seems to be in a hurry. That's right, a terminally ill person doesn't have much time to waste. Bojio sat at the side, watching as Yu Hongliang clenched his teeth, unable to say a word. They all sighed, a single sentence was able to hit the person's sore spot. Chapter 859. It was impossible for Yu Hongliang not to be infuriated. Especially when he caught sight of Chin Mo's face, his face contorted. Officer, be careful of your interrogation methods. With that, Bojio tilted her head. She had one thought. This suspect was doomed. If he used another method, he wouldn't be able to take it. Look, I'm a realistic example. Chin Mo arched a brow. He took out his phone and turned it over for Yu Hongliang to look at the screen. I would like to hear Mr. Yu's explanation. Yu Hongliang snorted at first, but when he saw the words that appeared, his expression changed. How was that possible? How did he have it? That person had sent him the exact same message. How was that possible? A person like Yu Hongliang would never have guessed that there were some geniuses like Chin Mo who could memorize the attributes of every hero in a game. He could even calculate the time it took for the heroes to recover their skills. It was a message with only a few words. Of course, Chin Mo remembered it. Bojo understood since the Almighty often used such things to bluff her. He had even shown her the video. It was the same logic. The Almighty had been playing mind games from the start. As expected, when Yu Hongliang saw the contents of the message, he panicked. He glanced left and right, feeling extremely uneasy. However, he continued to be stubborn. What a joke, I'm just asking someone out. What's the point of explaining? Chin Mo held a cigarette between his fingers, his voice cold. My language isn't good, but I can recognize the words on the screen. The police wouldn't have time to deal with an ordinary person, but this is premeditated and organized. It doesn't seem as simple as an appointment. First, I didn't kill anyone. Second, I didn't commit arson. I never forced anyone to have sex with me. Every single one of those women was willing. Just because of that, they arrested me and charged me with organized crime. Is this how the police handle cases? Yu Hongliang turned his head away, refusing to communicate with the police. Chin Mo sized him up. Indeed, you can't kill them. Mr. Yu doesn't seem to understand AIDS well enough. Do you think anyone infected with AIDS will die? Medical science isn't that outdated. Those who deserve to die will die, and those who don't will live well. Yu Hongliang, who had always been filled with hostility, gripped the edge of the table when he heard this. What did this policeman mean? Was he implying that his actions were useless? How could this be? All right, the interrogation is almost done. Chin Mo turned his head and asked the person handcuffed to him, shall we go? Leaving just like that? The crime squad members sitting outside were just about to push the door open. Director Huang stopped him. Let's take a look. The suspect's emotional state was obviously different from before. Was this Chin Mo's interrogation method? No. It should be said that this was the interrogation method of a genius criminologist. If the crime squad members were surprised to hear that Chin Mo was leaving, they wouldn't be able to control themselves. When Yu Hongliang heard that the other party wanted to leave, he could no longer contain his anger. Speak clearly. What do you mean by only those who deserve to die will die, and those who don't deserve to die will live well? Chin Mo leaned back, nonchalant. Mr. Yu, can't you understand the literal meaning? Chapter 860. Director Huang narrowed his eyes, his beer belly sticking out, looking just like a minion. Bojo glanced at Yu Hongliang's expression and pressed the record button. The main event was about to begin. As expected, after a long period of psychological stimulation, the Almighty poured oil on Yu Hongliang. In the end, he took a puff of his cigarette and poured the last bit of fuel on Yu Hongliang. Mr. Yu's first crime was committed by a university student. After a medical examination, he received timely treatment. The early stages of AIDS were well controlled, so he could still continue living. Although it's a little inconvenient, for a patient like Mr. Yu, who is in the late stages of AIDS, he shouldn't be able to live for long. Before he could finish his sentence, Yu Hongliang couldn't hold it in, punching the table heavily. Those greedy girls who should have died in the sewers, how could they be alive? That's impossible. That's impossible. Just you wait, when their illness acts up, I'll see how they're going to cling on to others. By then, their entire bodies will be covered in pustules, the mere sight of them will be disgusting. His voice was loud, so loud that it echoed throughout the interrogation room. It wasn't a lot of words, but it exposed the suspect's thoughts. The crime squad's record taker looked at Chin Mo with a completely different gaze. Chin Mo only asked, "Is the recording done?" Bojo smiled. Of course. Her and the Almighty's speculations were between the two of them. Their relationship was the same. Without a tacit understanding, How could they work together? The moment Yu Hongliang heard the word recording, his face fell. That was when he realized he had said the wrong thing. But it was useless. Qin Mo stood up, stuffing the cigarette in the ashtray. His voice wasn't loud, but his words were precise. It's going to be hard to deny the fact that you admitted your intention to kill. It's a pity that Mr. Yu wanted to find loopholes in the law. Yu Hongliang was so angry that even the rhythm of his breathing changed. His chest heaved up and down. He really wanted to kill someone. The youngster added, "You thought you could escape after killing someone, but not only did you fail to escape, you didn't even manage to kill the person you wanted to kill. Your criminal skills aren't that good, brother. Who the F***ck was your brother?" Yu Hongliang wanted to stand up, but his wrists were locked. He could only remain on the chair, displaying his anger. He had never expected such an outcome. The system in this area was clearly incomplete. And those people, were they really not dead? The thing that Yu Hongliang couldn't accept the most was that he would die alone. Bo Jiu was clear that the Almighty had seen through this, which was why he had given Yu Hongliang a psychological hint from the start. However, Yu Hongliang's mental endurance was too weak. "There's a needle mark on his arm." Qin Mo saw that the guy beside him looked like there was something wrong with him, so he reminded him in a calm voice. Bo Jiu had an epiphany. No wonder he was a drug addict. People who were drug addicts tended to get emotional easily. Especially after being locked up, they would feel a sense of urgency that they couldn't control themselves. However, Brother Mo, when did you notice that there was a needle mark on his arm? That guy's sleeve had been open all this time. Qin Mo glanced sideways. His handsome face was chiseled, but he remained nonchalant. When he waved his fist at me in the theater. Chapter 861. Qin Mo bore a grudge. But it had nothing to do with the other party. It had something to do with the other party delaying his arrest. Director Huang watched the scene through the glass, heaving a sigh of relief. Why was there so much pressure and attention on this case? It was because there was a possibility that they wouldn't be able to punish the culprit. For a long time, dealing with suspects who were infected with AIDS had been a huge challenge for the Public Security Department. If the suspect didn't admit to it, they wouldn't be able to pin the crime on him. This was a country ruled by law. But there were some things that weren't allowed from a moral point of view, yet some people would still do it. They would take harming others for granted. Now, there was a solution. They would let the culprit get what he deserved. As an experienced detective, he would be at ease. Perhaps, this was the reason why Qin Mo had been helping Director Huang. No matter how much he looked like a corrupt official, he was indeed a police officer who cared about the people. Director Huang, the higher-ups are calling, asking for our results. Director Huang inhaled deeply, changing his expression to deal with the higher-ups. Yes, the evidence has been found and we are continuing with the investigation on Z. Hand it over to someone else. Why? The people at the side saw the change in Director Huang's expression and realized something was wrong. Z's case can't be dragged on any longer. I will send a criminal expert to you. As for young Master Qin, he has been away for 3 years. We aren't sure if he can make accurate judgments. This expert is from America and has interacted with Z in the past. He might be able to help with the case. I know you have been trying to get Qin Mo back all these years. Back then, he had indeed achieved something no one could achieve, but old Huang, are you sure nothing will happen to him? Has he regained all his memories? He is General Qin's son, who will be responsible if anything happens? Director Huang knew everything else was bullshit. The main point was the criminal expert that the higher-ups had sent over. But even if he knew, he couldn't do anything. He had to listen to the higher-ups. After hanging up, Director Huang wanted to smoke, but the moment he turned around, he realized that the 2 men were standing behind him. Their expressions were the same, they had obviously heard his low growl. Director Huang explained, there will be another criminal psychologist who will be working with us. He's from America and is said to have crossed hands with Z before. He's really good and should be your helper. Director Huang couldn't believe his own words. It was obvious that someone at the top wanted to improve their performance, so they sent someone over. Damn it. Chi Nemo glanced at him but didn't ask anything else. Bojo chuckled. He had fought her before. Apart from the Almighty, those who had fought with her seemed to have been tortured badly by her. The key case investigation unit was really interesting. They didn't use a top-notch expert like the Almighty, but they had to use an outsider. Was he trying to be more of a hindrance? Chi Nemo was looking at the information in his hands. He glanced up and caught sight of a certain someone's smile. What has this got to do with you? Why are you so happy? Chapter 862. Chi Nemo couldn't be bothered with such excuses as none of them were true. Director Huang didn't take it seriously, continuing to explain to Bojo, let me put it this way, those criminal experts might sound good but they aren't as good as your brother Mo, they aren't as good looking as my brother Mo, Bojo added. It was obvious who she was referring to. Chi Nemo stopped reading the information and turned his gaze over. Bojo arched a brow, filled with confidence. Chi Nemo capped his pen. Why are you so sure? Have you seen him before? Bojo. How could he trick her like that? The Almighty was really invincible. Chi Nemo is the only beauty in the world. That was what Chi Mo's fans often said on his official Weibo. She sure remembered it well. Chi Mo's gaze softened, his aura not as cold as before. Director Huang gritted his teeth. Why did he have to sit there and listen to them flaunting their affection? Weren't they talking about the crime experts? Chi Mo lifted his lids. Are all the people in the theater here? The seats you mentioned should have all of them. Director Huang caressed his face. I've questioned them just now, they are all here for the movie, nothing out of the ordinary. We can only release them. You should be aware that such suspicions aren't enough to arrest them. Chi Mo remained silent, his gaze pausing when he reached the fourth last name. Rao Rong. What is it? Is there a problem? Director Huang's eyes lit up. Chi Mo replied calmly, no, it's an esports player. Oh right, there's indeed an esports player here. He was just taken away by his teammate. Say, aren't esports players all on good terms? Director Huang's eyes were filled with envy. Chi Mo frowned, not saying a word. On the other hand, Bojo's gaze never left Rao Rong's name. It was him again. It was such a coincidence that he appeared with the suspect in the theater. Send someone to follow them. Chi Mo would never abandon his original plan just because he knew someone, that had always been his habit. Tell me if there's a problem. I'll definitely tell you, mainly because no one knows what you're thinking, Director Huang replied. The person who had gone to the internet cafe to investigate rushed back anxiously. Director Huang, there's a situation. There's a situation. What's going on? Little Huang still didn't know about the investigation. Chi Mo stood up. Speak. The computers in the internet cafe are indeed broken, and it's not just the computers that are broken. Even the surveillance cameras are gone for some reason. However, according to the owner of the internet cafe, something strange happened today. At first, the motherboard of one of the computers was burned, and then a sentence popped up on the screens of several computers. What are you talking about? Forgive Minion for being too eager to solve the case. The man took a sip of water. Is it fun? I'm asking you a question and you're telling me if it's fun. Director Huang was furious and the consequences were dire. He paused. Director Huang, I meant the words written on the screen. Is it fun? The minion quietened down and coughed heavily. Qin Mo's voice was low. Who is using that computer? Do you have any impression of the internet cafe? Chapter 863. Qin Mo put down the information in his hands. Call the boss over and get him to describe everything he remembers. Then, get the restoration artist to restore the face to a certain extent. There should be some differences. He scratched his head. The boss only has a rough idea. Qin Mo stood up. It should be a clue, send it to me. Director Huang couldn't understand. Why are you so fixated on a girl from the internet cafe? Fixated. Qin Mo seemed to be against the word, his voice calm. It's just because she's the mastermind behind the case. I'm just investigating. When Director Huang heard the word mastermind, his face was filled with shock. You're saying she. Qin Mo's gaze remained noble. Is it weird? Nope. Director Huang scratched his head. But she just went online, how can you be so sure she is the mastermind? Qin Mo tapped the handcuffs, signaling for a certain someone to stand up. Because just now, someone hunted her. Hunted her? What do you mean? Why am I getting confused? Poor Director Huang, he was already a middle-aged man but he was still losing his hair over such matters. Qin Mo didn't have the slightest interest in answering her questions. His cold voice sounded perfunctory. Then you can sort it out yourself. With that, he arched a brow. You want to stay in the police station? Bojo did want to stay there, but given the current situation, staying in the police station would be safer than following the Almighty. Director Huang wasn't going to let them leave without an answer. No, you have to tell me. I won't be able to sleep if you don't. Why do you think the computers in the internet cafe were broken? A few computers were malfunctioning at the same time and only the words "is it fun?" Qin Mo didn't want to beat around the bush. It was an internet attack. Director Huang was still confused. Who would be so bored as to attack an internet cafe? Bojo wanted to say something. What did he mean by being bored? Didn't he understand? More importantly, this was the second gift she was giving the Almighty. The Almighty shouldn't be so angry anymore. For example, the overbearing CEO buying a bag. Buying one might not be enough to settle his little lover. Buying two would definitely be enough. I have to say, in some aspects, my position as Joe is indeed wrong. Qin Mo swept her a glance before turning to Director Huang. Today, the mastermind tried to attack the core network of the commercial center. Once the network goes down, the entire commercial center will be in a state of chaos. Even I can't guarantee that everyone will be able to calm down. An expert managed to break through the attack and track down the location of the mastermind. This was the first time Bojo found the Almighty's words pleasing to the ear. Director Huang was righteous at times. We should thank the expert properly. You might not say that now that you know who that person is. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Director Huang was insistent. Regardless of who it is, the person who saved everyone should be thanked. Really? Qin Mo turned, his deep eyes looking into Director Huang's. In that instant, his eyes were as deep as the sea, making it hard to read his emotions. Chapter 864. What did you say? At that moment, Director Huang started to suspect that there was something wrong with his hearing. The members of the Major Crimes Division were also stunned. But none of them were as shocked as Bojo herself. She tried her best to look natural. But her heartbeat wouldn't lie. Did the Almighty already know it was her or? Qin Mo's gaze didn't waver. That person is Z. Director Huang was confused, he spun around. No, you mean Z protected the entire mall, defending against an attack. MMH, Chin Mo replied faintly. Director Huang scratched his head. Such a situation, such a situation. How is that possible? Why is it not possible? Chin Mo lifted his brows. Director Huang was frustrated. Let me think this through. Didn't you just say that the person behind the attack was the mastermind behind the series of cases? Now, you're saying that Z was the one who defended the network. Are you trying to say that Z isn't the person we're trying to arrest? I reminded you. Chin Mo's expression didn't change. Director Huang inhaled deeply, not saying a word. After all, it wasn't easy for him to thank a criminal. Besides, he was in a mess. Why was Chin Mo still speaking up for Z? He knew Chin Mo all too well. If it was a criminal he truly hated, he wouldn't be acting in such a manner. Director Huang paused. When he turned towards Chin Mo, there was a never-before-seen worry in his eyes. You are still the same towards Z, Chin Mo, regardless of how much you treat Z as a hero, Z is still a criminal, do you understand? Chin Mo's face remained emotionless. Let's talk about how you are going to thank me. Director Huang choked, calming down. At this moment, Chin Mo moved his left hand. Bojo arched a brow. Go. It seemed like the Almighty hadn't guessed it was her and was probably still doubting. But it wasn't bad to hear such an evaluation. In the past, the Almighty hadn't been so resistant towards her. A hero cherished a hero. MMH, it was the same for the Almighty. There had never been anyone who had caught her that she would want to bring home. But the Almighty's next sentence, Bojo's heart skipped a beat, her movement stilling. As for the fact that she is a criminal, I know it better than anyone else. Bojo tilted her head, her black hair falling over her eyes. She was also very clear about this. That was why they couldn't kidnap him and bring him home to raise him. Because that person was the Almighty. If they fought, both sides would be injured. On the other hand, the key case investigation unit still needed time to digest the news they had heard. In particular, how to report to the higher-ups was a very important matter. Director Huang knew that Chin Mo was bringing this matter to the surface to clear Z's name since the higher-ups had transferred the case. Director Huang understood some of the matters. Naturally, Bojo understood. If, she meant if, the two of them were not in such a position. Perhaps she and the Almighty could really be heroes. But that would never happen. She's Z. Is born black. Behind her, there was still something she had to protect. Just like behind the Almighty, there was someone he had to protect. It began to rain outside the police station. Chapter 865. At 9:15 p.m., there were fewer people on the streets due to the rain. At the entrance of the police station, Chin Mo held a black umbrella over her head. His face was noble and gentle in the rain. There was already a car waiting in the drizzle. It was a black Land Rover with a red military license plate. Under normal circumstances, it carried a strong aura. Young master. The Chin family's chauffeur was as thoughtful as ever, bringing an extra umbrella over. But when he saw Chin Mo and Bojo's handcuffed hands, he was startled. Chin Mo's expression didn't change. Other than raising his hand to wipe the rainwater off the youngster's face, his voice was calm. Let's go. Bojo was still deep in thought. The computer she had brought back couldn't produce any results in a short period of time. Fatty couldn't do anything about it, so she had to find someone more professional. Bojo wasn't worried about them finding anything since the other system had already crashed. In another half an hour, the remaining traces would be destroyed as well. This showdown would depend on how much the Almighty suspected her. Chin Mo sat at the side, his gaze landing on the youngster's headband. He asked slowly, "Have you thought of a way to talk?" With that, Bojo snapped out of her daze. She had been worried about many things, but none of them could compare to the situation in front of her. The Almighty wanted to talk to her. She wasn't sure if she could jump out of the car in time. Bojo shook the handcuffs on her right hand. It was obvious she wouldn't make it in time since the chauffeur was still heading towards the military compound. He had no intention of letting her go. Chin Mo glanced over, supporting his face with one hand as he watched her. He even tapped her wrist with an enigmatic smile. That pressure was indescribable. It felt as though her right hand would break at any moment. But it still looked good. Bojo felt that the Almighty was so likable because of his good looks. She sorted out her thoughts, but before she could speak, the Almighty's voice came again. The Almighty's voice came again, very slowly. "There's something I'm curious about. The first time we met, you said you wanted to compete in size with me. How are you going to compete in size with me?" In that instant, Bojo's words were stuck in her throat. The chauffeur couldn't understand his young master. As the person involved, Bojo understood. Back then, when she had pinned the Almighty against the wall, she hadn't thought much about it in order to keep her identity a secret. "I'm young and inexperienced." Bojo felt that it wasn't a good time to talk about such a sensitive topic. But obviously, Chin Mo didn't think so. The police station was not far from the military compound. Now that they were in the garage, Chin Mo lifted his lids and said to the driver in the driver's seat, "Old Wang, go in first." Old Wang knew that young master had something private to discuss with young master Fu. He didn't turn off the heater, so he opened the door and got out of the car. Now, only the two of them were left in the cabin of the Land Rover. It was rare for Bojo to feel that the situation wasn't easy to handle. As soon as Old Wang left, the pressure from the Almighty became even stronger. Just because you're young and inexperienced, you think you can flirt and not take responsibility. Chin Mo lifted the corner of his eyes. It seems like as a young girl, the wall-jumping scholar, your understanding of this is biased. Bojo knew that she wasn't strong in this aspect, hence, she decided to take the initiative. "Brother Mo, you can ask me why I dressed as a man. Coincidentally, I'm not interested in reasons," Chin Mo said slowly. His side profile was handsome as if it had been carved by a knife. Chapter 866. Chin Mo lowered his body, his black hair still damp from the rain. His fingers landed on the seatbelt. Bojo didn't think that the Almighty would let her off just like that. But even though she was prepared, Bojo didn't expect that after the seatbelt was unfastened, his long and beautiful fingers didn't leave. Instead, they moved down her waist and landed on her chest. Bojo raised her hand, arching a brow. "Brother Mo, what are you trying to do?" Bojo watched as the person in front of her glanced at her collar calmly, a faint smile on his lips. "It seems like you were serious when you asked me to hold it back then. Why? Aren't you going to hold my hand and let me check its elasticity?" Dark history. Bojo felt that ever since she knew the Almighty, every memory was a dark history. He didn't give the youngster any time to react since this time, Chin Mo was serious. He reached out and blocked the narrow car door, his left hand reaching under the hem of her shirt to remove the cloth. His movements were so fast that even before she could resist, she was already at a disadvantage. Her back was facing Chin Mo and one of her hands was cuffed, limiting her range of movement. The Almighty was formidable, knowing that she was good with her legs, he decided to stay in the car. "I'm more interested in your body structure than your reason for dressing up as a man." Chin Mo looked at the person in his arms. His ink-black eyes were tainted with a deep darkness. He pressed his body over and pressed his lips against the back of her fair and elongated neck. His deep voice caused the temperature in the car to rise to the extreme. Bojo straightened her back, not wanting to expose any weakness at this moment. Chi Nemo chuckled, his slightly cold lips moving upwards, landing on the tip of her ear. Just as you wish, let's try it out. Brother Mo, I thought we were going to have a good talk. Bojo wanted to move her wrists, but they were cuffed. She wanted to move her right leg, but it was pressed down. Chi Nemo arched a brow, his face reflected in the car window, making him look noble. Even with her back facing him, Bojo could see his face. His black and sharp hair, his handsome and robust body made him look like a devil in the night, extremely dangerous. All the time, isn't it? He smiled and flicked his finger. His breath landed behind her. Why? You don't like this method? An electrifying heat surged through her body at the contact. Bojo trembled uncontrollably. His body temperature seemed to have started to go out of control along with the temperature in the car. However, that voice didn't seem to have any intention of leaving her ears. His cold fingers wandered wantonly on her smooth skin. Then, he gripped her tightly. It's really soft and feels good. It's so realistic that not only can it fool some otakus, it can even fool me. This time, Chi Mo's smile was a little cold. Smart. Why does this sound so familiar? When she thought about it carefully, she realized that those were her own words. The Almighty's ability to hold a grudge was too good. Bojo seized the last chance to get up. I can explain. Chi Nemo pressed her back down, his breath thickening. His fingers didn't have the slightest intention of withdrawing. The softness under his palm still carried the delicate fragrance of jade that made his body heat up every time he thought about it. She felt that at this time. Chapter 867. But it's not suitable here. Chi Nemo pressed his forehead against the back of the youngster's head, putting up a final resistance. The sweat on his forehead flowed from his well-defined chin to his neck, which was already burning hot. At least there's a bed, that would make you more comfortable. Even though it's safer here, I can't bear to torment you for an entire night. With that, Chi Nemo had already stood up and unlocked the car. Bojo's eyes were burning with passion. By the time she realized what was going on, she had already been carried horizontally. Chi Nemo passed her his jacket. His long legs were straightened. Beneath the white shirt, his body was tall and fit. The raindrops fell on his hair, but it didn't affect his elegance at all. Madame Zhang watched as her young master carried her in. She wanted to follow, but when she saw Chi Mo's side profile, she retreated silently. The wall lamp was switched on, the light was dim. The second she was thrown onto the bed, the light was dim. The moment she was pushed onto the bed, the jacket was pulled open, the shirt was soft and thin, sticking to her body. The hand that was pressing down on her palm made her unable to move at all. The glass window wasn't closed, the wind blew in, lifting the white curtain. Chi Nemo didn't give her a chance to escape. The white shirt was half open, the hem rolled up, revealing the youngster's waist. Her skin was fair and slender, just as he had imagined countless times. It was extremely flexible to the touch, and as she twisted, the curve of her waist was even more shocking and alluring. Chi Nemo chuckled, landing on one knee on the bed, one hand holding onto her chin, the tip of his tongue entering, twisting and sucking. No one would be able to withstand such a kiss. His hand was still moving downwards, needing the most vulnerable spot. Bojo wasn't Chi Mo's match in this aspect. Her eyes were misty, she couldn't help but let out a low moan. Chi Mo's entire body went numb, the strings of his rationality snapped. He reached out to separate her legs. He had never wanted someone as much as he did at this moment. His heart was beating like a drum, his soul was drifting. Especially when he saw the youngster frowning slightly, her body trembling slightly. He wanted to possess her completely. So much so that his predatory nature was completely revealed. Especially when he saw the youngster lying on his bed. Her clothes were still on, her black hair messy, and her left hand was still cuffed. Her body was as clear and cool as a bright jade, faintly outlining her abstinence. Such abstinence stimulated Chin Mo. It was as if he was being sucked into a whirlpool, unable to resist. Looking into those eyes, Bojo knew there was no way she could escape today. As his long legs rubbed against each other, he couldn't find any point of resistance. His body was still terrifyingly numb. Bojo knew what the Almighty was planning. She bit her lips, her consciousness blurry. All the sensations in her body seemed to come from the series of numbness. Only one thing was clear. The knife that was hidden somewhere could not be used. That would hurt the Almighty's hand. Thinking about it carefully, it was just having sex. If after this, she could have a child that belonged to her and the Almighty when she left, it was not necessarily a bad thing. After having this idea, Bojo turned the tables, pressing his hand down. I don't like to be passive. Chapter 868. Before Bojo could fully comprehend the meaning of his words, Chin Mo had already carried her. Chin Mo had already hugged her, and the two of them switched positions. At this moment, Chin Mo was below her. His shirt was half open. His chest was faintly glowing. The lines were smooth and tight. It was tough and captivating. Bojo sat on Chin Mo's sturdy waist. She watched the man who could bring chaos to the world. He held her waist with one hand, his gaze like a broken black diamond. When he looked at her again, the coldness and sharpness had settled into the depth of the moon. It was as though he could suck her whole body in. There was a kind of man who was so handsome that anyone who saw him would be tempted. Regardless of gender. If he was willing. Previously, Bojo had a taste of the Almighty's ability to seduce people. She had thought that was his limit. What she didn't know was that when he took off his black trousers and laid there with his clothes completely unbuttoned, the masculine charm that erupted from him was really inescapable. Especially when the sweat flowed down his chiseled face, past his chin and stopped at his collarbone. Probably anyone would want to lay their hands on him. Bojo was no exception. She had always told him what she liked since she was young. That was why she had wanted to use her little keyboard to exchange for her pet the first time she had met him. In the end, he had complained that her keyboard was too old and didn't want her money. She had been depressed for a long time because of this. Every day, she would climb through the window and watch as he read. He would feed her impatiently, his little face cold. He had even warned her, "You can come but you can't dirty my book." She had indeed run around and her body was dirty. But a child should have some innocence. Besides, as the boss of a district, how could she not display her dominance? But since her pet had said so. Before she went, she would wipe her face clean. She had to bring a gift when she was a guest. This was the Bo family's teachings. But every time, he wasn't interested in the things she brought. Later, for some unknown reason, her canine pet became interested in her electronic devices. After washing her hands, he dismantled the Overlord game console that she liked. Then, she received a small drone. She liked this person. She liked it too much. She had to hesitate. His identity wasn't suitable. If the Almighty wasn't a criminal psychologist. If the Almighty was just a second-rate criminal psychologist. There was probably no such thing as being reluctant to part with him. She wouldn't fall in love with him anyway. It was because he was neither. Before meeting the Almighty, Bojo didn't think there was such a person. It was pure and powerful like a light that was not affected by the darkness. That was why she wanted it so badly, but she was worried that her identity would be exposed. he would treat her coldly. After all, it wasn't just him, even she was very clear about this. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. She belongs to the night. And he should always be in existence standing on the altar. However, she had also said that if the Almighty kissed her again, she took him away and raised him. Even if he didn't carry her away, he had to sleep with her once. Thinking of this, Bojo smiled and lowered her head. Her face was extremely handsome. Brother Mo, I gave you a chance to reconsider. Chapter 869. In that instant, the gentleness in the bathroom seemed to have been sucked away. All the warmth came to an abrupt end. Chin Mo froze. Even his long fingers that were hugging the person in his arms tightened. Chin Mo lowered his lids, sweeping a glance at her face. His lips were pressed into a thin line, his brows thick and his nose high. His beautiful eyes were like a whirlpool, without a hint of emotion. His gaze was cold enough to tell how he was feeling right now. Anyone familiar with Chin Mo would know that he had always been elegant and polite. Even when he was in a fight, he would always smile. But now, the murderous aura rising from his body made it so no one dared to approach him. It was still drizzling outside the window. Chin Mo placed the person in the blanket, the room turning cold. Bojo wasn't fully awake. In her blurry state, she seemed to hear someone asking her, "Why did you leave?" It was a low and moist voice, hoarse. Bojo was exhausted, falling into a deeper sleep. The night sky darkened. Princess, who was curled up on the glass balcony, was unusually quiet today. It wasn't because of anything else but because it didn't dare to create a ruckus. After today, it finally understood one thing. In the past, it had always thought that it was impossible for that fellow to lay a finger on its master. But now, it seemed like the other party was too strong. Its master hadn't been able to resist even when she was pinned down. Sigh, as a cat, there was nothing it could do about it. It was already so late but there were still sounds coming from the kitchen. Madame Zhang would definitely wake up. But when she saw the tall and slender figure in the kitchen, she was stunned. She wasn't sure what her young master was thinking. His eyes were dark and deep, as though they were a bottomless abyss. Madame Zhang walked over. "Young master, let me do it." Chin Mo shook his head. He was cooking noodles in a pot to ensure it wouldn't turn cold. He carried it upstairs with one hand. Madame Zhang watched from the back, hesitating if she should tell Madame that her young master had brought young Master Joe home today. Even Auntie Zhang could tell that today was different. Chin Mo rarely cooked, so he wasn't hungry. He knew clearly who the noodles were for. He looked at the person lying on his bed. Her black hair hung down and covered her face, revealing only her chin. Her sleeping appearance was very pleasing to the eye. But Chin Mo's narrow and dangerous eyes narrowed. He chuckled coldly. "You haven't learned your lesson." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaned forward. While he was half asleep, he was forced into a state of ferocity and numbness. He was unable to extricate himself, and even his toes were trembling. Bojo felt as though she was in a furnace. She exerted force on her fingers and couldn't help but let out a sound. When she opened her eyes, they were blurry and misty. It was supposed to be a punishment, but at this moment, Chin Mo felt as though he was about to melt in it. When he met her gaze again, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed her waist and rained down on her. The white window screen was blown up, and even the lingering scene gave people an extremely beautiful and dreamy feeling. The sky was bright. After the rain, the sky in Rivertown was very blue. The sun shone down from the east, speckling the bed. Chapter 870. She tilted her head and woke up for real. Her entire body was sore, especially her legs. But it couldn't compare to the lingering redness on her neck. Bojo's eyes dimmed. Her first reaction was to look at her chest. It was an obvious mark, but fortunately, he had taken care of it. If not, yesterday's situation, the moment she thought about it, Bojo's ears turned red. It was better not to think about it. Bojo arched a brow. Her skin was fair and she wasn't wearing a top. When she sat up, the sunlight seeped in, scattering the blankets like snow. She looked extremely beautiful, but the cold and lazy aura was still there, like the snow that had been covered in dust for a long time. She didn't get off the bed immediately. Instead, she wrapped herself in the blankets. Coincidentally, her eyes met Princess's glassy eyes. She couldn't resist the urge, grabbing the cat over and squeezing its paws. When Chinemo pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. His gaze was as deep as the night. Be it the bed, the person, or the cat, they all belonged to him. He didn't want to let go of any of them. Bojo glanced up when she heard the noise. When she saw who it was, she restrained her hands. Honestly, the Almighty was the person Bojo didn't want to see the most right now. Mainly because her motive for sleeping with him wasn't pure. But Bojo had an evil and cunning personality. She wouldn't be able to do it no matter how shy she was. Hence, she took the initiative. Brother Emo, do you have anything to eat? Chinemo arched a brow. She wasn't shy at all. He reached for the bowl on the side of the table and lifted the lid. The fragrance of the pork bones seeped out. Chopped green onions were placed on the noodles. The bones were soft and looked good. Just from the looks of it, it wouldn't taste bad. The only thing that made Bojo feel awkward was the fact that the Almighty had fed her personally. When their eyes met, it was inevitable for her to avoid his gaze. But she knew that the Almighty loved cleanliness. When she slurped the noodles, she was rather serious and didn't drip any soup. If the Almighty hadn't said faintly, "It's my first time." Bojo paused. What did he mean? Chinemo watched her, his expression nonchalant and noble. Since you slept with me, you have to take responsibility. What do you think? Slurp. Bojo swallowed the noodles, instantly realizing that this was a trap. She couldn't help but remind the Almighty, Brother Emo, girls are at a disadvantage in such matters. Really? Chinemo opened his official Weibo and found a Weibo topic that many people had reposted. The topic was, which Almighty in the esports industry do you want to sleep with? Without a doubt, Chinemo was at the top of the rankings. Spade Z came from behind, and even though he had a good momentum, he was only ranked third. Who do you think is at a disadvantage now? Chinemo played with the lighter in his hand. His black hair fell down and he smiled slightly. Bojo looked at the data. For the first time in her life, she had the urge to be first. I've never been in contact with other girls, and I don't confess to anyone. Therefore, I won't meet someone and say that I've confessed to them. The voice that was pressed against her ear was still very pleasant to hear. But why was every single one of them talking about her dark history? Chapter 871. According to the Almighty's words. Indeed, she was the one who had the upper hand. She remembered the comments the internet gave the Almighty clearly. The first half, Chinemo is the only beauty in the world. The second half, it's a pity he can't sleep. Bojo felt that she needed a cigarette to calm herself down. She reached out to push her hair aside, revealing her exquisite features. Brother Emo, give me a cigarette, I need to think about it. Chinemo chuckled, his cold gaze sweeping over the youngster's face. You mean you want to smoke after bed? Bojo. Why did she seem to be going overboard in front of the Almighty? Chin Mo passed the thin cigarette into her hands. But as he leaned forward, his other hand reached into the blanket. Bojo widened her eyes in shock, her fingers stilling as she held on to the cigarette. What is it? Not used to it. Chin Mo leaned his head against her shoulder, his handsome face tilting slightly. His breath landed behind her ears, his voice carrying a hint of laziness. Weren't you used to it last night? Chin Mo's hand touched the back of her waist. It was smooth and slightly cold. He couldn't help but slide his hand inside. That was why Bojo had such a reaction. Don't hide, I'll let you touch it. Chin Mo pulled her into his arms, his voice sounding as though it was a normal thing. I can't let you sleep for free. Bojo shrunk slightly. Every part of her body was warm. She didn't manage to smoke. Instead, she was taken advantage of. Every part of her body seemed to evoke that familiar numbness. But there wasn't even a piece of clothing by her side. In the end, Chin Mo stopped, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Bojo's beautiful face was flushed, even her hair was in a mess beside her ears. She seemed to have been taken advantage of. Indeed, she had been taken advantage of. But the person who had taken advantage of her was truly evil. Do you like it? Chin Mo chuckled lightly, pressing his lips against her ear. You had the same reaction last night. Jill was still shy, the tips of her ears turning red. She continued to argue. Brother Mo, can we talk about it? Can we not talk about what happened last night? Hearing this, Chin Mo's smiling eyes turned cold. Sure, let's talk about how you're going to take responsibility. Bojo knew she couldn't escape. She arched a brow. Are you sure you want me to take responsibility? I'm afraid you'll regret it. Regret? Chin Mo crossed his long legs and looked at her with his deep eyes. He was still so perfect. It seems like you have a feasible plan. Does it count if I want to kidnap you to the Fifth Avenue? Bojo almost blurted out. Fortunately, she was rational and wasn't tempted by the man in front of her. Nothing much, I just wanted to hear how Brother Mo wants me to take responsibility. Bojo caressed her nose. They were at the negotiation table, it wasn't the time to feel guilty. Chin Mo's lips carried a smile, forming his own noble air. It wasn't that warm. How do you think a man and woman who have sex should be held responsible? Bojo glanced up at him. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't avoid it. Instead, she went straight to the point. It depends on the situation. After talking for so long, you've never thought of taking responsibility. How could Chin Mo not understand the youngster? He stood up from the bed, his eyes still as deep as the sea. They were very beautiful, but the ocean had already sunk during their conversation, all the warmth sucked away. It seems like I really have to handcuff you for you to learn to be obedient. Chapter 872. Bojo knew she had to take responsibility for this matter. In reality, she wanted to take responsibility more than anyone else. However, one day in the near future, the Almighty would definitely regret the decision he had made today. Hence, she couldn't allow things to develop to that stage. Bojo only wanted one thing in her entire life. When she was young, it was Chin Mo. When she grew up, it was still Chin Mo. He lay back down, raised his arms, and covered his eyes with a sigh of regret. There would always be someone like that. It's something you can't get no matter how much you want it. Because she was afraid that one day, that person would look at her differently. Bojo had once thought about how great it would be if the Almighty could belong to her. She wasn't good at cooking, but she was good at instant noodles. Besides, she was good at earning money. The Almighty liked to read about deductions. She could build a huge bookshelf for him. But she could break away from that. Most importantly, she could arrest the criminal. She was a hacker and had been on the list every year. Other than not hurting people, her methods of doing things were not allowed by the law, nor were they allowed by the Almighty. It was one thing to clear her name, but it was another thing to capture her. The Almighty had already expressed his intentions clearly. Bojo knew that it was a good thing for her. No one except the Almighty would want to help a criminal. That was why Bojo had been shocked. She had even wondered if there would be a glimmer of hope. But the reality was that they were both black and white. Helping her was because the Almighty only cared about the matter and not the person. In the future, if there was such a day, after her identity was exposed, when the Almighty wanted her to take responsibility, she would definitely bring him home to raise. More importantly, the Almighty's suspicions wouldn't be dispelled so easily. Bojo was right. If not, Fatty wouldn't have been studying the computer in the police station. The next day, he had some news and called Chin Mo, "Young Master, I used the system recovery function and there are indeed traces of operation on the D drive. But the traces are missing, so I can't be sure if the computer has launched an attack." Fatty scratched his head and said, "That's because those traces might be a cache created when something was downloaded." Speaking up to this point, Fatty paused. "Young Master, the computer in the coffee shop is clearly the one with the traces of a network attack. Why is Young Master so interested in this computer?" Chin Mo didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "If we set up a mature defense program and pass it to someone else, will it affect its use? If your skills are good, you probably won't." Fatty was telling the truth. "I've never played like this before." Chin Mo listened to Fatty's words. In his mind, the youngster was indeed calm, even calmer than him. No matter how much his body liked it, his eyes were still clear and overly rational. She had always been like this, never taking anything to heart. She could start at any time, and she could also end it at any time. Thinking of this, Chin Mo clenched his fists. His black hair covered his body as he stood tall and straight. His expression couldn't be seen at all, but it was gloomy and cold. Chapter 873. Young Master, are you saying that Z might have transferred the firewall's operating system to another computer and got someone else to activate it to divert our attention? In reality, Z isn't in the cafe but somewhere else. Fatty wasn't dumb. Combining the questions his boss had asked him before, he deduced the answer in one go. But it's too difficult to do that. Not only does it require the implant to have superior network skills, the person working with it has to be good at seizing the time. Fatty still felt that the possibility was low. Chin Mo glanced up, his voice calm. "Don't forget, Z is on the move." In other words, nothing was impossible. Fatty paused for a moment. Indeed, he felt that anything was possible. Chin Mo tilted his head, lighting a cigarette for himself, his long fingers holding it. "Have you checked the surveillance cameras in the cafe? You didn't miss anything?" "Yes, I've checked all of them. Because this coffee shop is a well-known chain restaurant, and there are a lot of people coming and going, it's impossible for the staff to remember every customer. There are an average of thousands of customers here every day, and the person using the computer didn't seem to order anything. Instead, he went straight up to the second floor and sat by the floor-to-ceiling window. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that position was broken yesterday afternoon. We did make an appointment to repair it at night, but it happened while we were repairing it." Fatty knew that when explaining the case to the young master, the more detailed the better. Chin Mo took a puff of the cigarette, leaning against the wall. His chiseled face was shrouded by the smoke, his expression hard to see. "It seems like someone got the information on the commercial square before the crime squad did. They even knew which surveillance camera was broken. It's not simple." "Yes." Fatty paused, seeming to have thought of something important. But there is something. Young master, do you remember the surveillance video you asked me to pull out? According to the customers on the second floor, the person sitting in front of the computer was wearing the cinema uniform. Even though no one saw his face, the key point is that he was wearing the cinema uniform. Young master, I asked a manager of the cinema. He said that before the incident, there was a problem with the locker and it was one of their staff who informed him. But when he asked about the follow-up work, the staff disappeared. He was puzzled too. We all know what happened next. Someone handed the contents of Yu Hongliang's locker to the police. Fatty paused and forced himself to ask, so, young master, shouldn't you get rid of your suspicions about Little Spade? It's obvious that the person who pretended to be a staff member was the one at the coffee shop, and Little Spade was playing games on the 5th floor at that time. It doesn't seem possible. Is that so? Chi Nemo glanced at the flickering cigarette. Then tell me, why did he disappear after the competition? He didn't even put on his uniform. Fatty choked and couldn't say anything. Chi Nemo fell silent. Fatty's logic wasn't wrong this time. The results were completely different from what he had written. Chapter 874. Brushing past each other in the cafe, we can basically see what the other party is wearing. That shouldn't be a problem. Fatty spoke of his conjecture. But it was the most logical conjecture. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. It's a perfect crime, there doesn't seem to be a single flaw. Fatty didn't know what else to say. Usually, when young master said such things, it meant that he didn't fully believe the outcome. Chin Mo reached out to pour himself a glass of wine. When he placed the ice cubes in, his gaze deepened. Tell me, what did you find from the car keys? Aardwolf is in charge of this, we will have to wait another day to get the driving records. Fatty scratched his head. Young master, Supreme Alliance will be heading to the neighboring city in the afternoon to prepare for the second match. You and Little Spade, you guys, he had heard that young master had handcuffed Little Spade last night. Handcuffs. How much hatred and resentment was there? It seems like you are really interested in my private life. Chin Mo asked slowly. Fatty replied immediately, no, really. I think it's better to keep Little Spade alive if we are to face Lin Chintao. Brothers, he had tried his best, risking his life to protect Little Spade. Fatty glanced at the endless messages in the Alliance's WeChat group. But he couldn't understand why the voice on the other side of the phone had suddenly turned cold. There was an indescribable wetness in it. I want to keep him but he isn't willing. With that, his boss hung up the phone. Fatty was confused. What did he mean by willing? Little Spade wasn't willing. That wasn't possible. Little Spade had threatened to torture the other party until they called him daddy. Fatty didn't know that Chin Mo's unwillingness wasn't what he thought it was. At the main house of the Chin family, Madame Zhang was still in the kitchen. She walked over with a plate of fruits, pausing slightly when she saw the wine glass in Chin Mo's hand. It wasn't her young master's style to start drinking before noon. Besides, he had been fine before but now, Madame Zhang could clearly feel an indescribable feeling. It was cold but there was something else. Fortunately, Chin Mo didn't stand there, turning around. Madame Zhang, bring me a set of clothes, something young Master Fu can wear. Okay. Auntie Zhang felt that this was right. If there was anything that two people couldn't talk about, there shouldn't be a Cold War, right? Upstairs, the handsome youngster looked at her phone. After reading the message, her eyes turned cold. She deleted it and sent a few words over. There's a problem with Rao Rong, I need to keep an eye on him. How are you now? Good, the same movie uniform you asked me to prepare is very useful. Hoshino sat at the very end of the line, but he couldn't hide his jade-like presence no matter what. The person next to him saw that he was sending a message and poked his head over. "Who is it? Who is it? Take out." Hoshino put away his phone and looked at the comic book in front of him. Chapter 875. With that, he scanned the surroundings. If the opponent is Xiangnan, what are your chances of winning? No one spoke. After a second, someone removed the magazine covering his face. Someone lifted the magazine covering his face. He had a handsome face and hair longer than a girl's, but it didn't affect his aura at all. 100%. The club manager smiled, his eyes shining brightly. "Good, that's what we need. I'll go discuss the price with the investors and the sponsorship." Before the manager could finish his sentence, Hoshino stood up. Hoshino stood up, stuffing a hand into his pocket as he headed towards the door. Before he left, he tossed a bomb. If Supreme Alliance and not Xiangnan were the champions of the National League, the chances of winning wouldn't be 100%. After saying this, he walked out of the conference room. The manager widened his eyes. What does he mean? What does Hoshino mean? He means it literally. Meinan laughed, asking the member beside him in a flirtatious manner, "Your vice-captain went to watch Supreme Alliance's competition again yesterday." "Ah. He went." "I don't know, but he didn't sleep in the dormitory yesterday." "He really went." Meinan caressed his lips. "Why is he so interested in Supreme Alliance?" Outside the door, in the deep corridor, Hoshino glanced at the photo of a certain someone smiling faintly while playing. His lips curved upwards. He really wanted to have a match with them. After all, he had never seen Z in that photo before. Second floor of the Qin family's house. Bojo glanced around. She didn't have any clothes to wear, so she put on the jacket that the Almighty had left on the rattan chair. The advantage of being tall was that she could wear the jacket as a skirt. She was so self-reliant because she felt that she had to clean up the bed sheets. It wouldn't be convenient if Madame Zhang did it. Anyone who had been there would know what had happened when they saw the red. It would be best to keep the fact that she had slept with the Almighty a secret. Bojo wasn't good at household chores, hence, she wasn't gentle when she removed the bed sheets. Princess stomped on the wooden floor, his hair about to explode. It was fine if she had thrown a pillow, but she had thrown it at his head. Was she doing it on purpose? Also, how stupid must you be to not even know how to remove a bedsheet? Even master is better than you, meow. Qin Mo also realized that every time he went out and came back, the person and the cat in the room would definitely cause trouble for him. The moment Qin Mo walked in, Princess had already returned to her nest in an arrogant manner. With a domineering expression, she started to bite her fake mouse, as if she had not participated in the incident and had not bitten the bedsheets. Bojo arched a brow. She looked at the cat's betrayal in disdain. Then she glanced up at the Almighty. As smart as Qin Mo was, he knew what was going on. You can't even settle a bedsheet. Geniuses are bound to have some flaws. Bojo raised her fingers, finally pulling the bedsheet out. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.